So I set myself a challenge because I know times are hard for a ton of people right now, and normally hobbies are the first things to go when money gets tight. But I'm here to prove to you right now that you can play the Pokemon TCG on a budget and be competitive too. So my challenge was I have to build a whole deck from scratch for under £10. Every single card in the deck, add up the value, has to come to under £10. And there was another little caveat. I couldn't use a deck that already features on Limitless, because I know for a ton of people that playing their own creations and building their own unique deck is really important to them, and I want to cater for you guys too. So when you're building a new deck, the first thing you have to think of is the overall strategy, number one, good enough, and number two, worth actually executing? And as a general rule of thumb, a deck strategy normally falls in one of two camps. The first camp is to just go for one shot, try and knock out your opponent's Pokemon in one hit, turn after turn. Or the next strategy is where you often do 2 shots, maybe 3 shots, but you weave in some disruption to make it harder for your opponent to play the game. So not only do you have to think about whether your overall strategy is going to be good when you're building a new deck, but it's also a really good idea to sort of have a look at the meta game and see how you can target it. For example, if we were to look at the day 1 meta in the Vancouver Regional Championship, you can see that 70% of the field is occupied by Lugia decks, Mew decks, and Reggie decks, as well as Lost Box too. So that means if we want our new deck to do well, you have to realistically have game plan against all of those decks. Otherwise, 70% of the time, you're twiddling your thumbs. Okay, well then how do you actually target those decks to make sure your deck has good game plans? Well, again, if we were to look at the Vancouver meta, you can see that Lugia, V-Star, and Mew VMAX and Regis all operate exclusively off special energy. This makes cards like Temple of Sinnoh or other special energy denial quite a good play right now. There is also a heavy dependency on rule box abilities with Lugia and Mew, so that means maybe ability lock might be quite strong. That means cards like Path of the Peak are instantly much better. And even Lost Box uses Radiant Greninja 2, Path of the Peak shuts that off as well. But then you've instantly seen one of the problems with trying to target all the metagame at the same time is that it's often quite hard to do so, since you can't really play Path to the Peak and Temple of Sinnoh at the same time. So with that in mind, I decided to target Lugia, V-Star, and Mew VMAX, and then have soft game plans for Regis and Lost Box. So what did I cook up with my £10 then? Well, to be honest, countering Mew and Lugia is fairly easy. They both use special energy and they both use rule box abilities. And I decided locking off their abilities is more crippling for them to play the game. So that means I instantly slammed 4 Path to the Peak into my deck. But as strong as Path to the Peak is, it can be replaced. So if Lugia replaces your Path to the Peak and then they use Summoning Star, you are all of a sudden in a world of pain. So I needed to have another game plan realistically. And that was when I remembered that Owen Cameron actually played a Mew VMAX deck that had a 1-1 Aerodactyl V-Star all the way to a 3rd place finish at OTIC. Aerodactyl V-Star's V-Star attack actually sort of counts as a permanent Path to the Peak while it stays in play. This means if you was to use this and Lugia never knocks it out, they can never use Summoning Star, or Mew can't use Fusion Strike System. This is starting to sound rather good. And luckily for me, you can buy these Aerodactyls on Card Market for like 80p each. But I wasn't quite done there with the disruption. I wanted to make sure that if Mew VMAX or Lugia found some energies, that we could try and remove them as fast as possible. So I put in 4 Crushing Hammers to remove them on a coin flip, and then a couple Memory Capsule. Memory Capsule would allow me to use Aerodactyl V, the basic attack, which actually discards an energy from my opponent's active too. So that's Lugia countered and Mew VMAX. What is my game plan going to be for Lost Box and Regis? Well, this is where it starts to get a little bit dicey, but bear with me. Lost Box tends to grow their hand over the size of the game with like Flower Selecting, Concealed Cards and Colress. They need to have a big hand so they can utilise and do whatever combos they want, such as play their Mirage Gates or find their Sky Seal Stone for example. So I thought if I was to play 4 Judge and 3 Marnie, I can limit their hand size and make it so it's really hard for them to actually play the game. Now, it's not the strongest of game plans because, if they top deck well or draw well, then I'm sort of stuck. But I think it's good enough right now. So that's settled. That's my deck strategy. We want to spam Path to the Peak as early as possible, follow up with a turn 2 Ancient Star and make it really hard for our opponent to play the game. So this is how our skeleton list looks, and it looks rather good. However, I can see one glaringly obvious weakness that we need to fix straight away. The draw power in this deck is rubbish, and that's going to make it really hard to find Path to the Peak early or even get our Aerodactyl V-Stars out. So I think every other card in this list should be geared towards making it as consistent as possible. So the first thing to add is definitely a 2-2 barrel line, because when we're playing Marnie and Judge, that we actually run the risk of bricking our own hand. So if we have the barrel out, at least we can draw up to 5 and hopefully draw what we need. 2 copies of Serena were added instead of Boss's Orders, just so we can have another draw supporter if we need to. One other problem I can see with this deck when you have limited draw is actually finding one of our 4 copies of DTE could prove quite difficult. So in order to alleviate that, I'm going to add 3 Energy Lotto, which gives us a 7 card dig to find DTE or any other energy when we need them. So I think 2 copies of Evolution Incense as well as our 4 copies of Ultra Ball will just make sure we can find Aerodactyl V-Star and Barrel as early as possible. And I think Stone Fighting Energies are going to be a real easy include here, as it's going to make our Aerodactyls a little bit more tanky. Very nice if we're actually starting off the game going second. So there's the list. It'll be on screen now, as well as the total price you'd have to pay going off Card Market. I'm actually very happy with how this list panned out. Only thing left was to play a couple games against myself, but then I instantly clocked another issue with the deck. Even though we've added the barrel lines and the energy lottos, the draw power was still a little bit too weak. I found that if I was going second against Lugia or Mew, I'd really struggle to find that Path to the Peak, and then the game would get out of hand really fast. So to alleviate that, I actually swapped out the Crushing Hammers and Fan of Waves and replaced them with Trekking Shoes, giving us a little bit of extra dig. And to be honest, it transformed the deck a lot, and now I'm feeling super confident. But I want to put my money where my mouth is. It's easy for me to say this deck is good when I haven't actually played it competitively. So now I'm going to go off to the local league event and let's see how we do. Right then, so at League, my first round opponent was playing Mew V Max, and they went first, which means it's actually quite hard for me to win. They won game 1 because they got fusion energies all around the place, and realistically, I had no win condition. Game 2 went pretty much more according to plan because I managed to stick Path to the Peak and use Ancient Star, turning off all the Genesects, meaning I got that win. And then in game, unfortunately, my path didn't stick going second, meaning that I quickly got overrun, meaning I actually lost my first round. Oh dear. Right then, so my round 2 opponent was playing 4 DTE Mew, and I feel as if this matchup is a little bit easier than the Fusion Strike version because Rock Crush is really good at getting rid of their DTEs, and there won't be any Meloettas knocking about to really skew prize trade. Game 1 went pretty much how it should because I managed to stick Path and get Ancient Star off. But unfortunately, game 2, our opponent managed to get 2 Mew VMAXs out each with a DTE, so there's nothing I could do there. But then game 3, because I was going first, went back to how it should, and I managed to get a win there, meaning I'm now 1-1. My round 3 opponent was playing Fusion Mew again, and I got a little bit sad to see they were playing Fusion Mew. But luckily for me, and luckily for them, they didn't draw too well at all. My Path to the Peaks managed to stick, and no Meloettas came out, meaning I am now 2-1. One more win, and I might take this event home. My round 4 opponent was playing Lugia V-Star, and I was very happy to not be playing against Mew again. However, I was feeling quietly confident as I did win the coin flip, and I know for a fact that if I'm going first with this deck, I am favoured, since in game 1 I went first, managed to get Ancient Star off before my opponent could use Summoning Star, which means they couldn't really do anything. And then in game 2, going second, I actually managed to stick Path to the Peak and my opponent couldn't remove it, meaning I got to get to Ancient Star again before my opponent could use Summoning Star, leading to a quick 2-0 victory, leaving me with 3 wins and 1 loss on the day. Meaning I actually won the event. Ignore the leaderboard there. I was the only one to win 3 games, and once the TO realised that, well, the leaderboard was wrong, I got first place and I got to take home 3 prize packs. But here's the interesting part. If I'm to pull some fire out of these prize packs, there's actually a chance I can make a profit on this event. And would you look at those last pack there, I managed to get a 2-hitter, and that Golden Pikachu on its own is worth £10, meaning I actually profited on this event. And if you're feeling inspired to build a new deck yourself, why don't you check out Pokédex? And if you do, use discount code BERTSPTCG for a little bit of money off as well, and make sure to use Dragon Shields to protect those decks.